Greetings to everyone on this beautiful spring day. Welcome to this church where the stranger is embraced. Welcome to our fellowship where each person's spiritual journey is honored. Welcome to our beloved community. I'd like to also welcome our guest speaker today, Reverend Paul Boothby, and again to our pianist, Michael Casey, and our guest musicians, Meredith Hadaway and Rebecca Hoff. Announcements. Today is the first day that we're accepting yard sale and auction items here at the church. Collection will continue through April 16th, which is the deadline for all donations, including those for the live service auction. Please donate as soon as possible. For us to try to reach our fundraising goal this year, it is more critical than ever to donate. Please ask friends, family, neighbors, and whomever else you may think of if they have items and/or services they would be willing to donate. We need a volunteer to photograph silent auction items that come in on April 14th and 16th, as our other volunteer will be unavailable. Please contact Darlene if you can help. The other announcement for today is that following today's service, there is a meeting with the Legacy Advisory Task Force where you can share your thoughts and aspirations for the Doris Scott bequest. Let's continue our service with the chalice lighting. We light this chalice as a symbol of the light within all creation. We light this chalice for truth. May the search for truth reveal our souls. We light this chalice for love. May the love for others be strong in our hearts. Okay, our first hymn today may be new, and I've asked Michael to play through once. It's hymn number 44, We Sing of Golden Mornings. Please rise as you are willing and able to join us. And those of you in the front, there might be one, and let's look around for each other so everybody has an independent. today's opening words are in the back of the hymnal. If you want to follow along with number 435 by Kathleen McTeague. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see their communion, the reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together. I'm going to take a minute to introduce to you our guest minister. Reverend Paul Boothby is a retired UU minister living in Tunis Mills with his wife Krista and their dog Mia. He is a fifth generation UU who grew up in Maine and earned his BA in human ecology from the College of the Atlantic before going to Starr King School for the Ministry for his master's in divinity. He has served congregations from Virginia to Maine. And we have to make a few adjustments because I'm short.
Good morning. Be at peace. Bring your seeking mind and your longing heart. You are among friends. Blessed are the questions of our holy restlessness as we seek to know ourselves in relation to all that is. We want to know the ways of the universe, the truth in front of our eyes, and that which is beyond our sight. We want to feel the sacred energy within our own being that connects us to all life and all things. Revelation from the very fibers of existence. In our togetherness, in our doing, in our speaking, in our listening, and in our waiting, wonder is revealed. Meanings coalesce. We find purpose. We find peace. Centering ourselves in compassion, we give thanks for this wondrous now. It is good that we are together. Let us pause for a minute of reverent silence.
Thank you. Now is our time for acknowledgements of the heart. I'm going to start by lighting a candle for victims of COVID, that's still happening, for victims of more timely gun violence and the tornadoes that have ripped through our country this week. I would also like to remember our first responders and all medical personnel who have come forth to help those who are victims. And now who would like to come up and share a joy or concern? And I'll light the candle while you're up here. There's room wherever you can find it.
My joy is that my daughter, Lorelei Hart, is here from Roanoke, Virginia, and she spent the weekend with me. And I gave her about 200 or 300 pictures that my wife had stowed away somewhere. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, this is up close and personal. Okay. I missed last week because I was had just been released from the emergency room where I'd spent Saturday night. I had my first and hopefully, well, probably won't be the last incident of AFib, and so they got me straightened out, and I saw my GP on Tuesday, and he said, "There's nothing wrong with you." So I'm going to count on that continuing to be the case.
I think my joy is that the path is finally finished. Something I wasn't sure was going to happen in my lifetime. Good credit though goes to the, if you look at the way it's weaves down to the Memorial Garden, goes to Terry Goldshier, Terry, and also to Penny McRae. They did the design work. So thank you, and please use it. Why we've waited this long for it.
My joy today is seeing so many people here. I mean, this is the most since I've been coming, and that means there's a lot more smiles here today than normal, and that's my joy for today.
Okay, let's just take a moment to honor any joys and concerns that people have that might be too dear to their heart to share with everyone today. Thank you. Okay, it's time for our monthly outreach collection that is part of the mission of the Social Justice Committee. And today we have Darren Tillman from Shore Rivers, where she is the Director of Community Engagement. And she's going to tell us a little bit about Shore Rivers. And then during the offertory, everything that you put in the basket that is not for a pledge or earmarked for something else goes to Shore Rivers. And there's also, it continues throughout the month in other ways through checks or through the donate button on our website. But anyway, today is our launch of this outreach. So Darren, if you'd like to come up and just step aside.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm Darren White Tillman. I am the Director of Community Engagement at Shore Rivers. Thank you all so much for inviting me. Thanks to Linda for reaching out. It's just a pleasure to be here on this gorgeous, bright spring morning with you all. So I want to tell you a little bit about what Shore Rivers is and what it is that we do and how you can be a part of the things that we're doing. And there are a lot of folks here already who are connected to Shore Rivers, including, did you know, your guest musician on the clarinet, Rebecca Hawk, is our director of development. So it's a staff of people like this who are deeply connected to our communities, who are multi-talented, and who are just delighted to be in community with folks. So Shore Rivers, as you might know, is a riverkeeper organization. Our mission is to protect and restore all the waterways of the Eastern Shore. So we're working in the Sassafras, here in the mighty Chester, in the Mileswy, and in the Choptank watersheds to do just that, to see what's going on with water quality and then to come up with solutions to protect and restore our rivers. So that means you have a river keeper for each of those waterways. I know last year you all had the pleasure of hearing from Annie Richards, your Chester river keeper, and Captain Annie is still out working on our waterways for the Chester. So those folks, the river keepers, are testing water quality, and they're on the rivers once a week in the season from about April to October to just have their eyes on these waterways, right? And they see things that I could never see. And if you ever have a free Wednesday and some time to take a ride with our Chester Riverkeeper, it is an incredible experience to see our waterways through her eyes. And I really encourage you to do that. That's one way you can get involved. The other efforts at Shore Rivers, besides this water keeping effort, which is essential, are around the ways that we can work towards solutions. Okay, so we know our rivers are polluted, and you probably know the main pollutants are nutrients, fertilizer, usually, right, and sediment, soil. Those are not terrible problems to have. Those things are coming from within our watersheds, and they're critically important on land, right? That's what makes our farmland so abundant. That's what makes our land so rich. In our waterways, they're catastrophic, but we have figured out some ways we can stop that. So the other thing Shore Rivers does is we work to put restoration projects in the ground. We find out through this monitoring where pollution is coming from, and we help to stop it by doing things like stream restorations or floodplain reconnection, big earth-moving projects, a lot of which involve native plants. Native plants are like the secret weapon because they need those nutrients and soils, and they will hold them in place and take them up before those things wash into our rivers. And then we also work through education, so we're in our public schools and we do field experiences with students of all kinds to really make sure that we are connecting the next generation of environmental stewards, right? Getting all of our kids connected to these rivers so that they can love them, right? You sort of have to fall in love with them first before you can care for them. And then the work that I get to do, community engagement, is sometimes looks like this, right? Where I get to speak to people, which I love, but also looks like partnership building with all of the other organizations we can connect to that are working towards a shared goal. So that doesn't mean just clean water, but organizations that are working for the future we want to build together here on the Eastern Shore. There is a lot to be despondent about, right? And I'm reminded by your cares this morning, there are so many cares in the world, and we know that climate change threatens the work that Shore Rivers and other organizations are doing, that we're faced with a lot of problems on the Eastern Shore, right? But when we work together with other social justice organizations who care about youth engagement, who care about healthy immigration pathways, who care about mental health and well-being, who care about the environment, when we put those values together and connect to one another, then we can really start to envision the future we want to live in. So one way you can get involved today is to be with us, stubborn optimists. I loved the words of our opening hymn, courageous hearts and hopes undaunted. That's what we need. Every day we're building the future we're going to live in, right? That's not a story that's been written yet. So joining us in a spirit of stubborn, determined optimism and doing whatever we can today to make sure that we're going to live in that future that we want to inhabit together. We're also so honored that you have considered Shore Rivers as your outreach partner this month. And if you would like to donate, some of the things that supports could be our water quality monitoring. I think last year this congregation supported the bacteria testing site at Crumpton. So that's awesome. That means that we can test that site every week from Memorial to Labor Day, and make sure that the bacteria levels are safe for recreating in that water. Ooh, there's a question, I love it.
No, it's not a question,
Oh,
it's a comment.
please.
I did the one at Skinner's Creek.
Thank you,
and
yes.
It's not, there's not money for it this year. So more than Crumpton, we have sites that there is not money for.
That's absolutely right. And sponsoring one of those bacteria sites is a great way to get involved and kind of adopt a site. And you can follow our Riverkeeper posts results every week about what the bacteria levels are like. And then not only that, we're doing other things like DNA testing, where is that bacteria coming from, and helping to put projects in that will hopefully solve those bacteria problems. And just let folks know how to make a good decision about connecting with and interacting with the waterways we love. Thanks for saying that. Another project that I wanted to connect you all with is going to be happening right here, right out your window. The Presbyterian Church is creating a river-friendly yards project in its back 3 lots here, and you all were have been engaged. Some of you have been engaged in this process, and you all were also part of the inspiration. Your awesome landscaping, the trees, the pathways, is spectacular, and they are hoping to carry that feeling forward so that there's a place for refuge, for some seclusion, and for some gathering that will also bring our native songbirds and pollinators that are so threatened, and we'll add a bunch of native plants to improve water quality. So you will be able to see that hopefully out your window starting this spring. I think they're going to begin with some tree plantings in the spring. So lots of ways to be connected to our work. You can donate, you can volunteer, you can also attend one of our upcoming State of the Rivers events. So these flyers are on your table at the welcome area there. These events are a blast. They always have free food and drinks. There may be oysters. They're usually oysters, thanks to our awesome aquaculture partners. And our Chester and Sassafras Riverkeepers up here, and Miles Y and Top Tank Riverkeepers farther south, will tell you in detail what's going on with the science of water quality in your waterways, and just more about the work that we're doing to protect and restore those waterways. So you can also become a swim tester, someone who monitors for bacteria, or a volunteer in our education work or with our events. We love and thrive on volunteers. We have about 1,000 folks in our volunteer database. We could not do this work without you all. You can plant a river-friendly yard. That just means adding natives whenever you can. Maybe cut back on or eliminate fertilizer, maybe mow a little less, do what you can to keep nutrients on land and not in our waterways. And then that last thing that I already mentioned, please go forth with us as optimists for a future where we've got abundant, fishable, swimmable waterways, and we're all there enjoying them together. Thank you.
Thank you. Please give generously. Please give generously to our congregation and to Shore Rivers today as you are able.
As we look to the future, we acknowledge the past with these words from Reverend Peter Rabel, who wrote, "We build on foundations we did not lay. We warm ourselves by fires we did not light. We sit in the shade of trees we did not plant. We drink from wells we did not dig. We profit from persons we did not know. This is as it should be. Together, we are more than any one person could be. Together, we can build across generations. Together, we can renew our hope and faith in the life that is yet to unfold. Together, we can heed the call to a ministry of care and justice. We are ever bound in community. May it always be so." I'm delighted to be with you this morning. I have preached to this congregation once before, but it was about 27 years ago when you were still on campus and I was the assistant minister in Wilmington. A lot has happened since then. The advent of the digital age and social media, a widening wealth gap, mobilization in the face of climate crisis, the legalization of same-sex marriage, and overturning of Roe, to name just a few. We've faced many issues as a country and as a religious movement. In my years of active ministry, I believe the single most transformative body of work that we have undertaken as an association of Unitarian Universalist congregations was our deep dive in these last 6 years especially into the difficult realities of systemic racism and the culture of white supremacy. We've studied our history as a country to see how America's usual way of doing business has consistently disadvantaged people of color. And we've looked at ourselves and our own institutions to see the uncomfortable truths about how we too have unwittingly participated in cultural norms which perpetuate the marginalization of minorities. And as difficult as that has been, the upside of accepting our past is that we have been learning how to recognize and to name the dynamics of white supremacy and privilege, so that when we see these patterns again, we can step up and be partners for change. I believe it is what we are called to do in this age, as Unitarian Universalists in the 21st century, across the country and even here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, to shine a light of justice on the dysfunctions of our society. It's good that we have been doing this work in our own hearts, in our congregations, and in our communities. This is how social change happens. Although it has often been painful and confusing and even divisive, the fruits of our work have been profound. Minds have been changed. We have encountered difficult truths and struggled to reconcile them with what we thought was true. We have grieved the loss of our illusions and humbly made room for a new way of being. And we've had to do it more than once. It's been a lot to learn. It's been a lot to face emotionally. And yet it is more than an intellectual or emotional task, because while we have been learning and discussing and writing and grieving, we've also been deepening our relational commitment to engage with difficult truths, knowing that it would change ourselves and change the world we live in. It's this realm of commitment, this aspect of being more consciously in relationship with the depths of ourselves and with the realities of other people and the larger context of interdependence, this relational, spiritual dimension of our work, I believe calls for special vocabulary. Because in this work, we are sometimes at a loss for the right words to describe what we are seeing, what we are working through. We may feel the need sometimes for more evocative words with more symbolic torque. I'm talking about certain traditional religious language that Unitarian Universalists for quite a span of time have stayed well away from, and which we still may have an almost allergic reaction to. I'm talking about naming our social ills in terms that some may find unhelpful or even repulsive. Words like sin. Sorry. I'm still a little allergic to the word myself. But words like evil. Oh! Okay. Or redemption. I think we should have had a Benadryl communion. Okay. We may be uncomfortable with these words, but I believe they can be effective tools for taking us to a deeper understanding of our relational reality and help us on our journey towards healing for ourselves and our society. But how, you may ask, can they help us understand cultural dysfunctions like white supremacy from the context of Unitarian Universalism and our way of doing religion? We don't use these words much, but let's try it out. We have learned that society we have inherited is permeated with unfair bias by many institutions and customs. It's a system which gives certain people advantages over others. It benefits men over women, whites over people of color, the able-bodied over the disabled, the wealthy over everyone else, and so on. And many people, often unknowingly, act in ways that perpetuate these injustices. And in a theological sense, any action which unfairly benefits some people to the detriment of others, indeed which may even cost those who are at a systemic disadvantage their very lives, would rightly be termed sin. But sin is a problematic word because it has been so misused and shallowly understood. It has accumulated a lot of cultural baggage. How could it possibly be useful to us? Well, for me, in my Unitarian Universalist idiom, I understand sin as a violation of our relational reality. Actions which harm our relationships with other people, or actions which harm our relationship to our truest self, or which despoil our relationship with the larger all that is. All these acts might rightly be termed sin. It means the health of our relationships has been violated and is in need of healing, in need of amends. Now, this is certainly a contrast to conventional understandings of the term. Popular culture tends to think of sin as a violation of church doctrine, breaking the rules or transgressing church doctrine in some way, usually about sex. And history has also built up the word as some sort of ultimate transgression, that the result of sin is eternal damnation, which is, let's face it, a bit overly dramatic. And obviously, as I see it, a tool of intimidation and control. And because of all these layers of misunderstanding and abuse, the word has become all but unusable among religious liberals. Now, I don't expect we're going to start using the word more broadly, but I do think it is helpful as we think about how the cultural artifacts of implicit bias lure people of privilege into the sin of exclusion, tempting people to carelessly inflict harm on other people. And it seems to me that any system which leads people to continue to commit sins of exclusion and harm, even unwittingly, a system which continues to do damage to the relationships between individuals and groups, is and ought to be rightly termed evil. Evil. It's another one of those words used as a tool of intimidation and fear and religious terrorism. But in its truest sense, I think it is appropriate in this context. The experience of privilege conditions one not to see the consequences of our actions or to see our own power to change norms, or even to believe that it is possible to change the momentum of cultural oppression. The status quo feels inevitable. This spiritual disempowerment, which is an aspect of evil, undermines spiritual agency. And the antidote, of course, is the work of spiritual discipline, the work of personal spiritual transformation, to see, to learn how to see everything we do in a relational context. It's an ecological perspective that begins with the reality that all lives are connected. We are part of an interdependent web of existence. And so we want to overcome our own complicity in systems of evil, to interrupt patterns of behavior in ourselves and in society which do relational damage. That is, to reduce the incidence of sin. Now, one important step in escaping the cycles of evil is the practice of confession. Oh. Excuse me. It's another one of those words. But what the heck do I mean by confession? UUs don't do confession. What does that mean to us? Well, as children, we are taught to make amends when we hurt someone, even if it's inadvertently. We've been taught to apologize. But before you say you're sorry, you have to admit to yourself, in your own mind, in your own heart, I have done harm. I am responsible for this. You have to confess to yourself, to name what has happened. And in the process of a proper apology, you have to name to those whom you have harmed what it is you have done, so that they know you understand the harm you have caused. This is not easy. We don't like to admit our mistakes or the harm that we've caused, because we don't want to be seen by others or by ourselves as less than noble or worthy or highly ethical, we tend to judge ourselves very harshly. The superego is a severe companion and hard to get away from. Now, feeling a sense of accountability, of responsibility is essential. But when we judge ourselves harshly, it undermines our sense of self-worth. And that dynamic of shame can prevent us from making amends. The whole idea of confession is to open ourselves up to the process, the possibility of healing and growth. When we face courageously what's going on inside ourselves, and we can forgive ourselves and find a way to make amends, to repair the harm that has been done, if that is even possible. But this is part of what it means to be committed to the ongoing search for truth, for justice, for a community of the whole world. And sometimes it can be helpful to use words we're not used to get at the heart of the matter. Now, I know all these terms like sin and evil and confession feel out of place in our Unitarian Universalist sanctuaries. Sometimes the word sanctuary feels out of place in Unitarian Universalist sanctuaries. But these are not without precedent in our religious heritage. For instance, I discovered that the practice of confession is not alien to our heritage. In one of our old hymnals back from 1937, there's a section of readings and worship services that often include a prayer of confession. Now, this means that some congregations were taking the time in their worship service to practice humility together, to enter into the spirit of holy contrition as a community. And here's a sample. Before the wonders of life, we acknowledge our failures to see and to revere. Before the sanctities of life, we regret our disrespects and indignities. Before the gifts of life, we own that we have made choice of lesser goods. And here today, seek the gifts of the Spirit. And before the heroisms of life, we would be enlarged to a new devotion. Amen. Fascinating. And though by the time I was growing up in the church, the confessional prayer was not part of our Sunday morning practice, it is part of where our movement comes from. And the practice of owning the reality that we are not finished. We are all still becoming. It's the spiritual practice of humility. Many religious traditions tell us that confession is good for the soul because it frees us to do the work that needs to be done next instead of getting stuck in denial. Because beyond confession, there's another step towards reconciliation. We need to resolve to not do it again. We need to make a commitment to be aware of the ways that we might harm other people or compromise our own integrity or harm the sanctity of the web of all life. We need to choose to do differently and be enlarged to a new devotion. The work is to bring ourselves to our better selves, which is the very definition of redemption. Redemption. A word used by some people to mean simply belief in the right particular doctrine according to a particular church. But that's a very narrow and shallow understanding of a very potentially helpful word, because redemption is really about living into our better potential. We are redeemed as individuals by committing to better ways of being. And we're redeemed as a society when we commit together to greater justice and equity for all people. Clearly, we are not always going to be able to live up to our better potential. No one is. And things don't always turn out all right. Sometimes things get worse. Sometimes we're the ones who make them worse. So we need a way to talk about those moments when we miss the mark and want to find our way back. All these words, these abused and troubled words that give us the willies when we hear them on Sunday morning, may help us to elucidate deeper meanings of what's going on. These are spiritual issues. And so we should look to the tools available to us from the deep well of human spiritual experience dug by other hands generations ago. In our congregations, these tools of religious language have gotten pretty rusty. But we can repurpose them and make them our own when we need them, to make them part of our toolbox. It's sort of like a torque wrench. You know, you don't use it very often, but when you need it, it may do the job a little better. And we're not likely to use these words in casual conversation, perhaps. We can keep them safely tucked away, but we do need to talk about what they mean, and how sin and evil and redemption and confession are relevant concepts for understanding the spiritual realities of structural social oppression. They can help us, particularly in the larger public conversation about the ills of society, when we are with people of other faiths. We can freely acknowledge that we also see sin and evil in society, and within the complexity of the human heart, we may have a different way of understanding those terms, but they may help us to find common ground and build common purpose. It takes practice. And so I offer to you a confession before the Spirit of life and love and you, my siblings in faith. I confess that I have sinned and been complicit with structural evil in my thoughts and words, in what I have done and in what I have failed to do. I have perpetuated the spiritual sickness of our time. I confess that I have been repeatedly backsliding into patterns of privilege and disconnection. I regret my inaction at so many missed opportunities to answer the call of love. And I hold in deep gratitude all those who encourage me by their example to try again, to show up, to take one more step on the road to freedom and my better self. This is our work as Unitarian Universalists in the 21st century, across America and even here on the Eastern Shore. Amen. Blessed be. Enough said. And now you rise in body or spirit as we sing hymn number 168, One More Step.
One more step.
we are running late, and so we're going to unfortunately dispense with discussion. We hope the discussion will continue in our foyer during coffee hour, and also feel free to talk to President Boothby. He has closing words.
I close with these words from the Reverend Gene Wallstrom, who wrote, "I believe the land around us is the sacred book. I believe how we are together on this raft is our salvation. I believe we are stardust. I believe the rocks are our bones and the river is our blood. I believe our lives are shooting stars."
Okay, now we will extinguish the chalice in unison. The words are in the order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Enjoy your day. Go now in peace. Bye.